Okay. Nobody's here yet. Okay, we're live. So don't say anything awkward. Hello, everybody. We usually go live about 8 to 10 minutes early, so we're going to give it quite a few minutes to get everybody logged in. Lothar is headed down. We are live.
So you said say something awkward was what I heard.
Right.
Excellent.
Do something potentially very embarrassing so that everybody sees. Hello! Yeah. Awkward is really fun to watch. It's not fun to live through. Hi, Liz. Hi, Stephanie. Wow. Everybody's logging on. Say hi. So, hang on, everybody. I gotta be distracted for a second. Hi, Mom. So I can post the links up. Alrighty. I always forget how to find the link. Share, maybe? Copy link. There we go. Okay.
I need your help really quick.
Nope, you gotta hang on real quick.
Okay. Just do that instead. That works out really well. Ugh.
Trying to get everybody the link. Now log out of mine. Yep. Hi, guys. Hi, Eleanor. Okay. Okay, so RUM community started a watch party. Awesome. Eleanor, can you post a link to my live thing on the official RUM event page? Because I can't post there. I have to get approved, and may as well just have you do it. Because you gotta approve it anyways. Okay. You want to turn off my ringer?
No.
Yes, do it. So it's 6:57. We still have at least 3 or 4 minutes before we're really going to get started. Ooh! I had my stand on something. So we're going to let people... Wow. It's interesting watching everybody's names pop up as they're starting to join. The names are popping up faster than the thing can keep up with. That's interesting. So. Okay. So in this... In my live feed, I am going to post some links. If you have already downloaded today's handout, great. If you are not in a position to download today's handout, that's okay too. We will go over it a little bit, but actually you're not going to be lost at all without the handout itself. But I'm going to put up a whole slew of links, and then I think I can pin it to the top of the comment section. We'll see once we get there. And the very first link is the handout for today's class, which we will go over at some point. I just posted it. Tell me if you guys can see that whole litany of links. How do I pin it? I feel like last time it gave me the option to pin it, but it's not giving me that now.
Okay. Nope, I can't do it. So.
Want me to?
Nope, passwords.
Oh, you can't remember your password.
Which means I won't be able to get back in my phone either.
You can. I made it so you just switch accounts. So now you can stalk my Facebook and see what I'm talking about all day long in all of your free time when you're not actually working at work, which you're always working at work.
Right.
Thank you, Eleanor. I see that you just posted it in that one, so thank you very much. The friending is what... Oh, so was that... Okay. So Tamra from Ontier just said the friending is why she can comment now. That's interesting. I wonder if it is we have to be friends in order for you to comment and ask questions, or if it is... Because I think there's two ways that you can start watching this. You can start watching it directly from my page, or if you're watching it via a watch party, there's a really weird thing where you can sometimes... comment only in the watch party versus commenting in the actual live video. It's weird. So I'm glad, Tamra, that you can actually comment now. Hi, Dad. Dad's on watching too. So I'm gonna go over here and start getting set up, and then we will get started. It's 7 o'clock. We're gonna give 1 or 2 more minutes just for everybody to log on, and then we're gonna get going. As I mentioned in the comments, I just put a whole bunch of links, and the very first link is on the handout for today. So if you can download the handout, fantastic. If you can't, that's okay too. This friending is why she can comment now. That's interesting. Lothar figured out how to log onto his Facebook on my phone.
I just didn't fat finger the...
Oh, you were fat fingering your password? Yeah. I sound so weird on the videos. Do you guys feel the same way? I think everybody... Because I think I sound... Obviously, I sound normal when I'm listening in this way, and otherwise I think I sound really nasally. So, alright, I'm going to finish up this cappuccino because I need a little bit of energy, and then we're going to get going. Okay. Do we want to try and move the table so that we can set the thing up, or you want to hold the thing the whole time?
No, we're not moving anything now, dear. Yeah, we spent hours yesterday thinking about this, and now we're starting, and we should move everything. Does that happen to everyone else, or just me?
That is a lot of exaggeration.
No, it's not.
We did not spend hours.
Hours.
No, we spent about 20 minutes, and then we went live, and your hand is all over the screen.
Good.
You can also flip it around.
I'll have to.
Okay. Now everybody can see you.
I am so pretty.
And your beauteousness.
Yay. Mwah.
Turn on these lights.
Where's the flippy?
Where's the flippy?
Where's the flippy?
Flippy's right there, where it's got like a reverse sign.
Can't see because I'm blind. Old eyes.
Don't show over here. They're gonna see.
Oh, can't show over the. Oh, not the junky basement.
We carefully tried to hide everything that we didn't want people to see in our basement, including my fabric stash. No.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. Give me 1 second, and then we will get started.
Dun, 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 dun.
Okay. Are we ready?
We are ready-ish.
Okay. So today's class is going to have to work a little bit different than the last 2 classes because Lothar is going to be manually being our cameraman today.
Can you tell that I am manually holding the camera?
Because there's going to be so much like me lecturing to you guys and then him needing to just kind of zoom in on all the things. So I know this is going to be devastating to all of you, but mostly you're just going to have to listen to me talk. And then hopefully Lothar can keep a steady hand. So
hopefully.
Let's do a quick sort of introduction and basic housekeeping. First of all, my name is Aveline de Scheresbroek. The man handling the camera is Lothar Nackschatten. We are both from the Barony of Flaming Griffin in the Kingdom of the Midrealm. That is if you do the SCA, or Society of Creative Anachronisms. Even if you do not participate in the SCA or any other reenactment group, you can certainly use block printing to spruce up your banners, your garb, trim for things, and other textiles, or even papers, but that's kind of a separate topic. So we welcome you here. We're excited to have you here. This is the 3rd class in a series of intended 3, but I think we're going to end up doing a lot more classes. The first class was really just a sort of history of block printing, why it's important to those that do reenacting, and how you can sort of justify using block printing to embellish and accentuate your clothing. The second class was really about how to carve your own block. And then this class is about the actual application of making your print on the fabric. So even if you haven't watched the other 2 classes, you can certainly get a lot of value out of watching this class, but I would highly encourage you to go back and watch those other 2 classes when you have the opportunity. They are up on our YouTube page, which is youtube.com/C for channel /Harpy and Hag, which is the name of our business. Additionally, if you are a member of the SCA and you live in the Kingdom of the Midrealm, this class is part of the RUM Virtual Online Learning and can count towards your RUM degrees. There are a number of student degrees that you can get, and this one counts for 2 hours, and it counts in the category of textiles and domestic. At the very end of this class, or this tutorial, we will go over some of the more specifics in case anybody has logistical questions about that. Additionally, we have had questions from other people from other kingdoms that are doing similar universities and certifications that they can get. If there's anything that I can do to fill out the information so that this class could potentially count for your degree, just shoot me a message. I'll be happy to comply and help you get some credit for things.
Got it. If anybody has questions, I will be able to read those off and then pass those on. So just type them in and we'll go from there.
And that was why I started off all this. Thank you. I kind of lost track of where I was going. So the way this class is going to have to work is I'll do a little bit of presenting, and then we'll pause, and then Lothar will ask some questions that have been asked. But we're going to try to keep this a little more, I don't want to say organized, because I don't think you and I ever do anything organized.
Always.
But we're going to try to keep this a little bit more succinct. This class itself is about a 1 hour to 2 hour class. We will get through the meat and potatoes of most everything in about an hour, and then there will be a little bit of playtime afterwards where we will talk about some troubleshooting, and we will also actually, if you have your area set up and you want to go along with us and ask us questions, then we will be available during that time as well. So we talked about who we are, we talked about why we're doing this class, we talked about the handout. The handout looks like this. This is the front page of the handout. Hang on.
Nope, back it up. Back into the light.
There we go. Better?
Yeah.
It's, I think, 11 pages, and there's a number of pictures that show you all the things that I have screwed up on. Yes. What are you doing? What are you doing? So, we will go over those things. What did you put on your fingers?
Nothing. It's a surprise.
I have no idea what he's doing. So. Okay. I love you. So anyways, we will go over most of this handout actually towards the end of things. So don't worry about having the handout right now, and we'll hold up some of the pictures of the pages. The only part of the handout that we're really going to discuss before we get started is this second page, or first real page of
block printing glossary.
Correct. And we're not going to go over this whole thing, but I do want to go over some of the terminology that we'll be discussing, so that as I'm discussing our setup and as I'm discussing what we're doing, you're not going, what the heck is she talking about? I don't know what this word is that she keeps saying. So let's go over some of our terms. The first probably most important term for block printing is the block itself. So this is just one example of a block. We have another one here. This one we hand carved, and this one we got from Kathmandu Designs, which we did include a link for them, as well as several other vendors who sell or can make custom stamps for you. All of those are in the links that I put above. But block, that is an important thing. So a block is usually wood, but if you were in our second class, you know that the blocks have also in the past been known to be various types of metal, as well as stone and even clay. But most of all, for today's purposes, we are using wood or linoleum. So the block is the thing that you are going to have your design, or motif is a word I'll often use, carved on. And it is carved so that the stuff that is in relief is not getting printed. Also, a term that I will use throughout this, especially when we get to some of the troubleshooting, are the design elements. And what I mean by design element is, so this right here is part of the element, this is part of the element, this is part of the element, and so when I'm saying between design elements, I'm actually referring to this space right here. So in between, in relief, that's what we're talking about when I use that terminology. Additionally, I will talk about a stamp pad, and you will see how we set those up right in a little bit, but this is actually what a stamp pad looks like. In this case, I'm using a very dirty, I forgot to clean it, but a very chintzy metal pan that I got from a secondhand store for 99 cents, and I'm using a bit of craft felt to actually create the stamp pad. That is one of 3 methods that you can use in order to apply the pigment to your block in order to do block printing. There's also something called a brayer, and we actually got some brayers, especially for this class, and we're very excited. So I worked with a brayer when I first started, and I hated it, but I think, honestly, I didn't have the right kind. So what we have right here is an actual rubber brayer, and this is made by Speedball. It's nice and clean. This is a 6-inch brayer that we have, and then we also got a 2-inch brayer for some of our smaller blocks like this one. So I'm going to pull both of these out and kind of toss these boxes to the side so they're out of the way. So the purpose of the brayer is to apply the pigment from the brayer is to toss the to apply the pigment to the brayer and then put it on. So that's the second way that you can actually apply pigment to your block. The third way is using a dauber, which is not something that I have used, but there is actually a class that was just taught by a gal from the East Kingdom. Her name is Viscountess Seva Ruffn's daughter. Roffin's daughter. I think I got it right. Viscountess just actually did a class in the East Kingdom, and she exclusively uses the dauber method. She has like a paint, or excuse me, a foam or sponge dauber that she uses. So when I get the time, I will link that class below so you can go ahead and take a look at her class that she taught as well. Other important terms that you might want to know. When I say pigment, I'm just using that very broadly because it could be paint, whether it's house paint, acrylic paint, fabric paint, whatever medium you want to use. It could be ink, it could be dye, it could even be a stain. Those 3 or 4 things that you might be using to put onto your fabric itself is what I'm going to be referring to when you're using pigment. Tonight, we will be using 2 different things. We will be using house paint, and we did actually get some of the Speedball fabric ink so that we can experiment with that as well, kind of play around with it and get to know what that is like to work with. We have gone over, I think, pretty much all of the really key terms that are in this glossary in your handout. There's one other term that I just want to talk about briefly. It's the term xylography, which is actually the act of, or the art of, carving and creating a woodcut or a wood engraving. So usually the term xylography is used with reference to making blocks which are intended for printing on paper. But technically that term also applies to making blocks that are intended to print on fabric. So occasionally it is important if you are big into research. That's why I included that term on the glossary itself. So, are there any questions about any of the terms?
Questions?
Nothing?
Type like the wind.
Okay, do you want to scroll up and see if there's any other questions that
there
they have
are
had?
Not. Oh, no.
What are you doing? Awesome. Alright, I'm going to set this over here. And what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about our setup. Are you good? Do you want to sit?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you for asking.
No problem. Okay, so we've got a variety of things that are just kind of strewn about the table right now, and we'll organize this a little bit more effectively in the moment. But right now you can see that we have our underlayment, and this is one of the things that we talked about in the class where we discussed the supplies. There are a number of ways in which you can create a spring or a cushion underneath the fabric that you're going to be working with. What I have enjoyed the most is working with this, and this is actually carpet underlayment. If you can see, it's about 1 millimeter to 2 millimeters thick. It is smoothed. Some of the underlayment that you get can be kind of ribbed. You obviously do not want any texture if you can get away from it. And in this case, you can see it has been quite used, but that usually does not impact the fabric itself. Right now, I happen to have 4 layers thrown up on my table just because that's all the layers that I have at the moment. But I'm actually going to go ahead and remove one of these layers because I generally don't like to work with more than 2 or 3 layers. If I'm really having a hard time getting the pigment to transfer onto my block, I will stop and add another layer because that makes it more springy. But 2 or 3 is what I generally like to work with.
One of the advantages to having multiple basically layers is you can actually set up your, I guess, sort of a pre-production. So like when you're doing complete outfit and you need X number of pieces, you can actually set those up, lay those on the floor, stack them up in the background so you can just, and not have to worry about taking the time to stop, let the paint dry, pull the fabric, and then have to reset everything. So it does speed your process up to have multiple layers.
Yes, definitely, because, yeah. The most difficult part about block printing is actually the setup. It's kind of like with sewing. A lot of people say, God, I hate sewing. But really, it's more so that they hate all the cutting and the prep work and the pattern design, or just simply cutting out the pattern. It's almost the same thing, at least for me, with block printing. It is a huge pain to get everything set up, to get your situation set up, to put down your things and actually tape things. And we are going to do that today. It will take a little bit of time in this. It'll probably take us about 10 or so minutes to do this. But it's something that I feel like really gets sort of glossed over in a lot of the online classes, particularly with fabric block printing, that will make a huge difference, taping or weighing down your fabric in some fashion. So we will be going through that. But before we get to that point, what we're going to do is we're going to set up our stamp pad, because it's going to take a little bit of time for the pigment, or in this case the house paint, to sort of bleed up through the craft felt. We want to go ahead and get that part started right now. So for the moment, I'm just going to push this off to the side. And you can see our table right here. So down here, we have this table that we had been working on. But it's an older table, and it has a lot of cracks in it, as you can see. And this also created a lot of sort of warping, and it was making it a very difficult surface to work on. However, it's big and wide and wonderful. So we took this other surface right here, which is actually a former tabletop, but it is perfectly smooth and flat, and we put it on top so it's supported by the bigger table. We can move this around as we need to. It is really vital for you to get as flat a surface as possible. If I didn't have something like this, what I would do is I'll usually take like my cutting mat, and I'll put my cutting mat at least on top of this sort of wobbly, wonky table so that we don't have as many issues. But for now, let's get started with our stamp pad.
Has our paint been shaken?
No, we're going to stir it. We're going to do all that on camera.
Got it.
So. Alright, can you see me okay?
Yes.
Throw my hair up before I get it in the paint, which is definitely a thing I do. So, today we're going to be working with this. It is, I think, a satin. It is just a standard house paint. We got it from a guy who is a house painter, and whenever he has extra paint cans, he just sells them. So if you guys look on, you know, Craigslist or your Facebook groups, you can sometimes get good deals like that. Otherwise, a gallon of paint will usually run you anywhere between $20 and $50. So it can be very costly, but that's one way that you can save yourself some money.
All right. We mentioned also, if you go to your major hardware stores, Lowe's, Menards, Home Depot, when they're creating paint for people, sometimes they don't quite get it right, so they will have what they call mist tints, and sometimes it's a quart, sometimes it's a gallon, and it's usually marked down pretty dramatically. So that's something, a way to possibly save some money, unless you want a very specific color. So
yeah, I will say, hang on, sorry. I will say that most of the mist tints that we find are usually kind of boring colors, so sometimes you do kind of have to just suck it up to buy the more expensive color. But let's go ahead and look in here. So if you're not familiar with what house paint normally looks like, here you can see a lot of the oil residue or the latex residue that's not quite been mixed in. So it is really important that you either shake or stir your can. I'm not very good with shaking, so I have a million of these little sticks, and I tend to stir. And you're going to want to really give it a good stir to get it going. If you have another pigment, obviously you're going to shake your bottle, you're going to squeeze your tube, you're going to do whatever you need to basically prep the pigment so that it is really thoroughly mixed and prepped before you're putting it on your stamp pad. So, that looks pretty good.
Great. And always take a little extra time to make sure that you seal the lids back on very tightly. Otherwise, your paint will not be as happy and productive as it could be.
So, pro tip about house paint, I learned this the hard way. When you put the lid back on to these house paint gallons, and then I usually will use a hammer to hammer the lid back down.
If I had a hammer.
Usually the paint will have welled somewhere in here because you've poured it out onto your stamp pad. When you do that and you put the lid on and you hammer, the paint from here, projectile goes everywhere. And I had it go on me, which was not a problem. I had it go on the carpet. Don't yell at me. And I also had it go on...
Oh my God. Are you guys not aware of what an amazing, amazing carpet we have? I have to share the carpet because to those of you who haven't seen it, it is...
Shag carpet!
Shagadelic 1970 early period. It's amazing.
Early period.
So I don't care.
But it did also go on a garment once. And so I actually had to use a different color paint to paint over where the paint had spattered because it was pretty thick. So be careful with that. Learn from my mistakes. You'll be hopefully doing a lot of that tonight. So we have mixed our thing. Oh, by the way, this was what I used to get the lid off. It's called a paint key at Lowe's. I think it's like less than $1.89. Highly recommend that you get one. So now we have our flat surface. Remember, we talked that this could be a pizza sheet. This could be a cookie sheet. It could be a, we have, down there we have a food storage bin. It needs to be a lipped pan so that the paint cannot escape it, and it must be flat.
Yeah, for the larger pieces, what she was talking about is they're basically, it's a cake carrier. It's got the plastic top over the top. You put your bundt cake in it. You get rid of the top, and you just have this amazing little dish that you can actually put a lot of paint for a very large size block.
Yep, so. That one's too big, I think, for us to be working with, and so I prefer these smaller ones.
Right, but it's good for the big blocks.
Yes. All right, so while I am pouring out some of this paint, do you want to scroll and see if there's any questions at this point?
I don't believe there's any questions. I was expecting at least, wow, you know, what medium did you use to write awesome on your hand, but nothing. It was a Sharpie.
Are you disappointed?
I am. I'm sad. I'm sad. All right, so the amount of paint.
Okay. So it's really going to vary based on your surface, but right now you can see that if I kind of move it, it would probably be enough to very lightly coat this whole thing, okay? But we don't want to necessarily coat the whole thing. We just want it to be in the middle where our block is going to be. And then this is my actual pad itself. It's the felt, right? Remember, this is just very cheap craft felt. I happen to have brown on hand from a project, and so that's what we're working with. You can use any color. I have found, in my experience, that the felt itself does not, like the color of the felt doesn't usually bleed into it, so it's not really an issue. Kind of whatever you can. But I guess to be safe, I should technically advocate you use a white or light felt so that if there is some kind of bleeding, it doesn't happen. So if you look, can you zoom in on this?
I can.
You can see how the paint is just barely starting to come through the stamp pad, okay? And it's hard to tell, but it's starting to get onto my fingers. What I usually do at this point is I take my stir stick, try not to get it all over the table itself. Oh, important thing to have on the table. Paper towel. You're going to need a lot of that. Okay. So I usually take my paint stick and I try not to transfer any paint if I can on the top of this. So I kind of screwed up a little bit, but I sort of just use this to kind of press down the pigment through the stamp pad itself. And you can see it's really starting to saturate more and more and more. You don't ever want this to be pooling in like large, massive drops seeping up. If you are doing that, you have definitely put too much pigment underneath, and it's just going to end up pooling and welling between your design elements and giving you all kinds of problems. So this is great to just barely start, but I know from experience I'm going to need just a little bit more to kind of get going, so to speak. So what I usually do is I'll roll this back, and then usually I'll just kind of like take my stirring stick, almost like a ladle, and I'll just kind of bloop, just a little bit more. If your paint is full enough, you really only need to do that once or so. And then I can kind of wipe this off on the underside of the stamp pad. You never want to be wiping this stuff off on the top of your stamp pad. It will be too much paint for you. And then, I don't know if you can see from this angle, do you see how there's like just the tiniest bit of a hump, so to speak, underneath? Technically, we don't want that because that would then push up. So we kind of want to spread this out just a little bit more, keeping it as much as possible in the center of the stamp pad, okay? So we are probably, I'm going to say a little more juicy than is ideal, but especially when you get started, that's okay. So give me a second. I'm going to put the lid onto this paint, so hopefully we'll not have any mishaps. And then we're going to set aside our paint. I'm not going to hammer it down because I know I'm going to need to use much more of this during the project, but I am going to at least set it down here, as well as the other paint, so it's out of the way. I'll put the paint key over here.
Got it. Yeah, do we have any questions so far? Feel free to type something in.
Okay.
Dun, 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 dun.
So now at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to set up our fabric onto our underlayment. So give me a moment. We're going to lay this back out. I'm going to try to make sure that my layers are even so that I don't have one kind of wonky and then it ends up screwing something up when I go to do prints. In this instance, we're gonna break a rule to start. Normally, almost all of my block printing, I insist I need to tape it down or I need to have somebody help me hold it down. But we have just a little bit of scrap linen here that we are going to go ahead and stamp some trim. And then we will, you know what? Do you want to do something exciting?
What?
We will give away this trim.
Oh my gosh.
We will give away this trim.
To the first person who actually asks a question?
No.
No, okay.
At the end of this, we'll ask you to sound off and put your email address in the comments. And we will pick somebody's email from that, and they will win this trim, and we'll mail it to you. Does that sound exciting? It's amazing. So, this I think is about 3 or 4 yards long. That to me is an optimal amount, just as a seamstress, that's an optimal amount of trim to cover the base of most hems of dresses or tunics, and then there's usually room for some cuffs, so 3 or 4 yards, depending on your garment, is ideal.
So why are you not taping down such a small piece of trim, oh dearest love of my life?
Because to tape 3 or 4 yards would be so time intensive for this particular class. We don't want to do it. Additionally, I find, especially when we are working with trim, I can usually apply enough pressure to get a nice clean cut block that it's usually not an issue. It's really more so when you're using big swaths of fabric that it is really important to keep things down. So we are going to go ahead and get started. It is important to keep your stamp pad on a flat surface. It will be appealing to want to take your stamp pad and put it on your foam, but don't, because remember the foam is going to be kind of springy, so that might make it a little wonky or difficult for you to get a good coverage on the block. So today we're going to be using this block. This is a 16th century Mughal, which I believe is the north of India, as Baranjali Buka told me, which is where we got it from. This is one from Kathmandu. It's a 2-inch tall design, and you can see it has 4 design elements on here. So what we're going to do, and I'm going to have Lothar kind of zoom into this, is you'll see the block, and you'll see kind of me getting the block wet and getting it primed. Now, something to know about doing this is usually the first 2 or 3 stamps of a block, you're not getting full transfer of pigment because you almost kind of need to get the pump primed, so to speak. So the first couple ones that we put down are not going to be our greatest, but you'll see that it's starting to get better. So, you guys ready? You ready for this magic? This is the exciting part. So I'm just generally, you can almost hear it sounds like a kissing sound. And I'm moving it around a little bit. You can see that all of the design elements, for the most part,
right in the middle of that one, yeah,
are covered, but it's really important that you're looking. Like right there we're missing some, right there we're missing some. So I'm going to keep moving it around a little bit. Listen for the kissing sound.
How much pressure do you use?
A kiss. Hopefully you guys are good kissers, so you know what that means, but you do not want to be doing a lot. Now see what happened up here? Some of the pigment from my stamp pad got on there, and so you're going to want to sort of brush that away so that when you start stamping on your fabric, it is not going to transfer into your fabric. So, if you come close, I don't know if you can see this, it's so light. Do you guys see this very small peach line right here? It's hard to see, which is a good thing. Yep.
Yeah.
So that is actually the center of my trim. And that is where this line on the back of my block, I am going to, as perfectly as possible and as consistently as possible, line it up. So when I go like this, I'm going to leave myself about a 1/2 inch so that whoever's sewing this has a 1/2 inch. I'm going to press. Now this is a really tiny block. Can you stand up to me real quick? So this is a really tiny block. It's hard to show you exactly what I do, but generally I want to go side to side, back and forth, and if I have any kind of special shaped block, I will try to press as wherever I can, almost doing the CPR method, right? I will try to press everywhere I can, and then when I go to lift up, I'm going to apply a little bit of pressure on this fabric right here, because it's not taped. I'm going to pull away from the place that I have applied pressure.
Ta-da!
That's actually a really good first stamp. So now look at the block here. You can still see that there is some pigment that is left on the block itself. And if I were to place this on the fabric, you would see a little bit, but it would be so barely there, it would not be a good transfer. So in between every single print, you need to reload with the pigment. Now, I intentionally didn't do a good job reloading. So you can see the difference. Do you see where the really fresh wet paint is here? And then down here on that design element part, you can see there is some pigment, but it's so light that it's not actually going to transfer well. So it's really important for you to kind of learn your blocks. And sometimes it's almost like if you hold it up to the light like this, you could kind of see, okay, I'm missing some paint there, so I need to go back to my stamp pad or go back to my brayer or dauber, whichever one you're going to be using. There we go. Much better. I'm still seeing a little bit of transfer here in the corner, which is one of the reasons why when we carve our own blocks, we generally bevel down the corners.
That's something we can do later too fairly easily.
And now I'm going to go back. In this instance, I've worked with these blocks enough. I kind of know, generally speaking, the amount of space I need to put. And we're kind of eyeball it. I think I did that a little too far away from. And then I'm applying pressure. Yeah. So generally speaking, I probably would have wanted to come in just a little bit more because you can see the space between those two things. So I'm going to keep doing this a couple more times. And while I'm repeating this, I'm going to ask for people to go ahead and ask any questions, including if they've ever done this and they're having problems, some of the troubleshooting we can do together. Otherwise, you guys are just going to watch me work for a little bit while we do this. You always want to make sure that you're your block is facing the right way. This one is perfect because it's the same way up or down, but some blocks have a definite orientation.
Have you ever, by chance, done that incorrectly?
No, anything I ever do is definitely intentional. Again, I'm going to look to make sure it hasn't transferred anywhere on my block that I don't want it to be. I really like this design. It's cute. Mm-hmm. And I thought it would look gorgeous in the red. I hope you guys do too. And hopefully one of you guys will be excited to get it and put it on your garment. Are there any questions?
No questions.
Nobody has any questions?
Boring.
Wait, am I boring or is it boring if they have no questions?
No.
I hope not.
We love our audience. Boring.
Ask some questions.
Questions, really, truly.
Or if you want to see something, honestly, if you want to see a better camera angle at something, please let us know as well.
Yeah.
Side to side, rocking back and forth, doing a little bit of CPR, as I call it. Applying pressure and almost pulling this, but be careful when you pull that to pull it off right.
Okay, hold on. I just have a message saying we're getting lots of questions, but none of them seem to be carrying through.
Okay.
Lots of questions. Can you not see them? And the answer is no, I cannot see them.
Okay,
so,
do me a favor.
Yes.
Go around there so they can see you. All right, guys, give me a second. I'm scrolling. The live video has lots of questions, says Gwyneth, but we are not seeing that. So hold on. Still trying. Yeah, please do. So hang on a second. Here's what we're going to do. Hi, guys. All right. Come on over here for a second.
Okay.
And we will switch for a moment. You guys can see our board. We will switch to a moment to our laptop. I don't know why it's not popping up. That's really weird. Yeah. Okay. Okay, here we go. We see some of them, but...
Okay. You get busy, and then I'll start reading them to you.
Okay, but it's not loading all of them. It says, do you recommend starting with a practice piece to make sure you're getting proper coverage and spacing before you start the real piece? Yes, absolutely. I kind of just went in knowing that if this particular piece of trim wasn't fantastic, that was okay. We could just go ahead and cut off the pieces that weren't good. But I actually have a bunch of scrap pieces of linen that I use over and over and over again to do those first 2 or 3 impressions and then get going. I also am so familiar with my blocks that I kind of know the spacing for the most part. Like I knew as soon as I put that second block down that I had gone too far. But that is because I do this for a living. I do it all the time, so I know the blocks really well. So I am looking to see if... So Eleanor, said she has sent us all the questions. It's so weird, but it's not.
Yep.
Hang on. A little bit of technical difficulties. Sorry, guys.
Dun, 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 dun.
All right, I'm actually going to start the video on my laptop so you guys are going to hear me, which is kind of obnoxious.
Awkward is really fun to watch.
Okay, let's mute me. Okay, so Eleanor has been kind enough to copy and paste all these questions. Thank you, Eleanor. So let's go through. How much paint would you advise having per project, or is it completely depending on the size of stamp, closeness of stamps, etc.? Yes, actually, can you pan down there so you can see all of our things? Right there, you can see most of our paint supply. Some of these things are just basically like samples, which is not even 8 ounces. This will usually get me through at least 2 tunics. Sometimes 3 tunics, depending on how much paint there is or how much is transferred in the image. When it comes to the gallons, we have not gotten through a gallon yet So I'm going to say we're looking at least 6 to 10 outfits for a gallon. Hopefully that will give you an idea. If you are going to do a matching outfit for you and your pal, or you and your partner, then I would say you probably want to do at least the sample size, if not the quart size. Come up a little bit. Let's do this. Are you there? Can you see? There's Lothar. Although you're in the dark. You're in the dark. What's new? Oh! Okay. If you need some stamps to happen, before you get a clean stamp, why do you not have a scrap piece to stamp on cloth? Okay, so we've kind of answered that. I knew that this trim was basically just gonna either be a throwaway or something that I would trim off the stuff that wasn't any good. And fortunately, the first couple of stamps have been good. And actually, can you lift up that stamp off that stamp pad? You can get smaller than a gallon paint, I think, for samples. How much do you recommend for a project? We just answered that. Do you use a primer? Definitely not. I also do not personally use a fabric medium, but I know some people that do use the mediums. The medium will reduce the thickness of the paint itself. Yeah, did it start oozing? Yeah. Here, let's show them. So, in my excitement, I left the block on the stamp pad, and you can see how much.
Especially off to the side here.
So that's going to be too much. And so we're actually going to transfer this, not with the paper towel, but on a piece of fabric real quick. Where is... Just to get it off. And then we'll leave it there for a moment. And you can see, this is actually in my troubleshooting. So do you see down here, where there's that extra, it kind of started to bleed into the element itself. That is because I got excited. I left my block down on the stamp pad itself, and it started to basically sink into the stamp pad. And you have the block. It started to like well up here. So in this case, I actually need to go ahead and take a Q-tip, or you could take a paintbrush to remove what has welled up. Or if it's really bad, you might even consider washing and cleaning your block, which we will go over later on. But in this case, we kind of saved it in time that I don't think we need to. So we're just gonna clean it up with our Q-tips. Okay. So, let me make sure I've answered all the other questions. If you accidentally put too much paint on the pad, how do you walk that back, or can you? You can. You can either, like I just did, use a extra piece where I'm like, oh, that's just too much for us to try to clean off, and we don't want to keep doing it over and over again.
In the pan, I think, not the block, right?
Sorry?
Wasn't it the question is if it's in the you overdo the pan?
No, if you accidentally put too much paint on the on the pad. Yeah. No, you can't walk it back. You need to scoop some paint out. You get some waste, and I have done that before. If you put too much paint on your block, you're like, I'm just dumping this, basically. I don't want to try to put it on my garment or my trim or whatever you're doing, and you would dump it on a spare piece of cloth. Or, in this case, you can see that the stamp pad still has some space around the outside. You could possibly move to here, because eventually, through your working, this whole thing is going to get saturated. We just got started, so it's kind of safe to move over here to daub some of it off. And that's how you would do that. Okay, we're going to read the other questions. I don't know why they weren't showing up, so I'm sorry about that. Other than practice, is there a special magic when you are pressing down to not make it smear?
Practice.
Practice is part of it. And if you look at my troubleshooting guide, which we'll go over at the end, it's really about pressing it in the right way. And we'll go over that in a little bit with a bigger block so you can see it easier than the smaller block. And making sure that you're not allowing your block to bounce when you place it down, as well as making sure that your fabric is as tightly pulled as possible, because when you're seeing smear, it's usually because the fabric is sort of like puckered and lifted. And when you're trying to set the flat surface, if there's any part of your fabric that is sort of puckering, it's going to touch that first and then therefore smear. That's why I tape, almost everything. Another question, can you use a brayer to spread the pigment? Yes, and we are going to do that after the stamp pad method in a second. Can you use metallic paint? Yes, as a matter of fact, you can. We have used two things. So there's two metallic paints that I have found that are probably good to work with. This is a Rust-Oleum brand. It tells you that it's a latex-based paint. By the way, for anybody that has allergies to latex, latex-based paint is not actually from real latex or the whatever plant creates latex. It is a faux synthetic latex. So anybody that has a latex allergy, in theory, unless they have a separate allergy, should not be allergic to latex-based paints. But this Rust-Oleum has been fantastic to work with, and we have worked with it in both the gold and the silver, and it creates stunning cloth. I mean, it looked like actually woven gold or gilded cloth when I saw it. If you've seen their Excellencies Malachi or Olaf of Cinnabar, I did their investiture garments. Malachi has a red cote hardie with the gold paint, and Olaf has a clap and rock or caftan basically with the silver and black paint. So it looks like hopefully we have caught up on all of your questions. Eleanor, we're going to go ahead and leave this open so that you can continue to forward to us any questions, and we will try to keep an eye on that. Thank you so much for helping us out with that. And then we're going to go ahead and get back to what we were just doing. So we'll finish up.
And that's because Eleanor is...
The problem is, I think it's backwards.
Is it backwards? Oh no, that'd be terrible.
Yeah. So everybody thinks you've been like, put it back on there.
So it says hot emos. The problems
like,
with technology.
Everybody's like, what is Lothar doing? Eleanor says she's got us. And then I have a new message request from a Brooke Marie, so I'm going to see what she says. Letting you know that I, at least, and possibly others not on your friend list, cannot post comments and questions on your live video. That is true. If you want to go ahead and post them to the event page, we'll also try to check there, but that is unfortunately just one of the limitations. Either we try to do this on Zoom and it cuts you off after 40 minutes, which is kind of a nightmare.
Or just start sending friend requests and we'll take care of it as we go.
Yeah. The other thing is, and this is a little bit of a plug for us, we are trying to get to 1,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. Once we do get to 1,000 subscribers, we have the functionality to be able to live stream from our phone. You can technically live stream with a laptop, but that's a nightmare for trying to do a class like this, so it doesn't really work. So we need 1,000 subscribers, so hopefully that's enough incentive for you guys to go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel so that hopefully we can hit that and offer you more functionality. So, okay. So we're going to get back to things. We'll take this down.
You want to finish the trim
I do, actually. I do.
Another time, finish the trim, and then we'll start working on the bigger piece.
Yeah, let me get a couple of stamps out just so I can make sure that I, sorry.
You continue to rock.
No, it's not so much that. I want to fix this in a second, so hang on.
Okay.
I'm not communicating myself well, but just trust me. So, when we go back to this, that paint is going to have dried to the block some. So you've got to be careful because it's almost like you're starting over again. There's a decent amount of pigment on here, and if this was just wet after wet after wet stamp, I would be afraid it's too much. But because I know some of my pigment actually just dried to the block, I feel pretty good about going ahead and trying to transfer that. And let's see if I am right, because I could be wrong. Cat, go away.
Cat.
Our cat is in heat, and she is looking for a mate. Does anybody have a Tom they want to breed her with? Okay.
I'm looking for like a big pixie bob or something to, you know.
So, you can see that is almost perfect in terms of how much was on there, but normally would have been maybe just a little bit too much. So I'll do just a couple more stamps there. And then later tonight, I'll go ahead and finish up this block. And at the end of this, if you stay all the way through, so it's a good incentive, I'll have people throw their emails out there. Once I take down your email, I'll delete that comment so nobody can mine the comments for your emails. And then we'll pick a winner and advise them. So you can see it's not ideal in terms of not taping it down because it is a little extra work for me, but you're already seeing sort of the repeat of the design. And the only spacing I'm not super happy with is right here. But listen to me, because this, you and me, okay? This is really important. You're gonna screw up a lot. You're gonna screw up a lot when you first start. You're gonna screw up a lot when you're like me and you do it all the time. Your screw-ups are gonna be different, okay? Some of them are gonna be like, I need to cut my piece out and start all over again screw-ups. That happened very recently with one outfit I was making for stock for our store. I was just really trying to get going through this thing, and Lothar came home. Cat! Lothar came home and he said, I love you, but that looks like crap. And I said, I know, I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing wrong, and then maybe I'll salvage part of that piece for something else, or maybe I'll just use it as a good lesson of what I'm doing wrong. There ended up being something that the block started warping, but you're gonna screw up a lot, and that is okay. The process of block printing is inherently imperfect. That is part of the beauty of all of it. Here, I'm gonna talk to them for a second. Yep. Take Cat upstairs. Come with me, Cat. Listen, it's part of the beauty of block printing. Don't let anybody be like, oh, you screwed up on that block, on that one part underneath your armpit. If they do, kick them in the shin and give me their name, and I'm going to go over and I'm going to kick them in the shin. Okay? This is a deal we've got. So the process of block printing is inherently imperfect. It's also why it's so awesome and magical. Do not feel like, oh man, I kind of screwed that one up. Because here's the thing you'll also learn as you're block printing. And for those of you that do block prints, please sound off and tell me if you think this is the same. You will screw up on one transfer or one print, and you'll be like, oh, it's blurry there, or like there's not enough pigment, or like I just don't like how I spaced that one. But in the overall scheme of your garment, when you're wearing it, nobody's going to be able to tell. So let's see what Eleanor says, if there's any other questions.
Not at the moment.
Excellent. So, we're going to go ahead and have Lothar come on back. We are going to switch. What is it right now? 8 o'clock. Okay, so we're making good time. So, look at that handsome guy. All right. So, for now, I'm going to set this aside. What I usually do is I hang this off of our laundry room. We have some ropes and such. We are not going to worry about that right now, so I'm just going to hang it off the back of our backdrop. Don't let anybody see our really crummy basement. It's dirty.
Okay. I inferred from your remark that you will stamp finished clothing, not just fabric. I imagine it would save paint, but sounds much riskier. Thoughts on the trade-off?
That's a really great question.
Great question.
Okay, so as much as possible, I try to do all of my stamping before the garment is even sewn. You want me to stand up? Okay.
Better lighting.
So I try to stamp as much of the garment before the garment even comes off the table and is sewn. And most of the time when people say, hey, I'll pay you to stamp my outfit, I say, no way, because if I screw it up, I'm not sewing you a new outfit, okay? But there have been some exceptions that I've made for people that I love a lot. And there have also been some times where I'm like, okay, I want to experiment with our own stock and see what it's like.
It's usually just like around the bottom. It's not a
yes,
full outfit.
Correct. Never, ever, ever will I attempt to fully block print an outfit to the armpits, through the sleeves, through... No, that's kind of a nightmare. When I am block printing a finished garment, it is only ever, or either around the cuff, which is not fully sewn, like I'll leave the sleeve maybe to here, and then I'll spread out the sleeve fully, and then I'll block the cuff of that, or at the hem of either a tunic or a dress. I do not fuss with or mess with any block printing on a garment that is already sewn for the most part. The other thing, and this is really, it's more of an aesthetics debate. I don't think there's anything, there's no hard and fast rules, but I've had some people ask me, okay, so if I'm block printing something, should I block print the whole garment, or should I just do it around the base, or should I just do like accent pieces, like some of our stock has just the collar to an outfit and just the cuffs and just like a trim around the bottom. So if we look back, historically speaking, at block printed garments, any garments that we know, like we actually have the full piece or we can surmise it was part of another piece, the whole thing was block printed. They were all about making sure that head to toe, every bit of fabric was covered so that hopefully it would trick you into thinking, oh, that's an actual brocade, or that's actually woven that way, or that's like, wow, that's a really expensive fabric from Lucca, Italy, when it's really not. However, some people don't like that. It's either too much, it's too much work, aesthetically they don't like it, and they just want to put, you know, trim on things.
Mm-hmm. And we are an anachronistic society.
Exactly. Do what you want. Do what you think looks good. There is nothing wrong with doing the whole outfit, and in fact, that is more supported by period extant pieces, as well as the information and research that we have both from Cennini's treatise, as well as the Nuremberg Kunstbuch. But do what you want, okay? Whatever you want. I actually prefer having my whole outfit completely head to toe, because I want to look like I'm really bougie and rich and have a lot of money. But that's totally up to you. So we're going to pause right here. We're actually going to clean this block. If you want to stay right there, I'm going to bring the bowl.
Okay.
You can look to see if there's any questions.
Yep.
Okay, can you bring that little brush right there?
Zip brush.
And the towel, and then come on over. Normally, I will just move back and forth. We have a bathroom down here in the basement, so it's much easier for me to just clean it there. But rather than dragging you guys all over a house, we decided we're just going to do this here. So there's a couple ways in which you can wash it. If you have a kitchen sink that has like a sprayer that you can go like this, it really helps to sort of spray some of the paint from getting in between the elements. But I actually use this. This is actually just a shoe shining brush. And so I use this and just water, no soap, to scrub it off. Now in this case, I certainly would not want to submerge the wood. And when I'm in the sink, I try to just submerge it when I need to rinse it off. But you can see as I'm scrubbing that it's starting to sort of come off. You can see the difference between here and here. If you look really closely, you can see some of the paint is still... Can you see with the light?
Turn it just slightly upward so it's a little bit more light. There you go.
Okay. On the outside of this, I don't know if you can see, maybe this is a little better. See right there? There's still a little paint on the sides. So as much as possible, I want to sort of angle my brush to clean that off, or angle the sprayer to clean that off. Because otherwise, after lots of use, those edges will start to build and build and build. And then that makes the elements of your design even thicker than original. And maybe you like that, but I find that to be problematic after a while. So, because we're working with wood, and you really don't want to wet wood as much as you can not wet wood, because otherwise it warps, and that was the problem we were having with the block that I was talking about. You don't want to submerge or constantly be running it underwater.
Got it. So, next question.
Yeah.
So you print it after you cut the fabric, but before sewing, and don't do the pre-cut bolt.
Correct.
And the reason for that, is
because we get asked all the time, hey, if I pay for 4 yards of fabric, or if you buy 4 yards of fabric, I'll pay you back, will you stamp it? And the answer is no. Because I find I get crisp, clean, clear prints by using the tape down method, which we will do next. I do not like doing whole swaths because we don't have the workspace in order to make it pulled tautly enough. Even in the instance when we could have a big workspace, I have found that even if you're taping, like if you have 54-inch or 58-inch wide fabric, trying to tape those two things far enough apart and still maintain some tautness between those taped anchor spots, after stamping a little bit, the fabric gently starts to slowly pucker up, and it's just a pain in the butt, which is why we do not provide full swaths of yardage that is block printed. We will only piece block things. So I've used a towel, which I always keep handy, to kind of gently pat it dry. If you look real close, you can still see there is a little bit of paint down at the bottom of this design element, and that's kind of something we just can't avoid. You just got to watch that it doesn't build up over time.
Oh my gosh, I got questions coming through.
Are they finally coming through?
I'm not sure what's happening, but yeah.
It's exciting.
Got it. So we have a, can you seal the wood on the block to help with the warping?
So I've had that, I don't know. I would be worried about doing that and then not having the pigment properly apply to the block and then transfer off of the block. I have not played with that idea enough, but I am hesitant to do so. I do not think you will get good results. That is my prediction.
If you wash frequently, what is the lifespan of a wooden block? We've not...
I don't know yet. We've been doing this for a year. The oldest block we have is from last May. And we have used, let me see.
Yeah.
We swing back that way.
Eleanor, you are wonderful, but it looks like the questions are finally coming through. So thank you so much for everything you've done so far.
So this is the oldest block we have. We have probably used this block 8 to 10 times. No, probably more.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. We'll say 8 to 10 times, okay? You can see... Let me use this. You can see there's pigment that is building up here, right? On the outside of it, you can see it starting to build up here. And every once in a while, I take my X-Acto knife or my scalpel or my carving tool, and I try to carve down some of this. So, at a certain point, it will build up. But I haven't had a block breakdown yet.
And again, this is also the linoleum as well, so...
Sorry.
Got it. That's fine.
The light was starting to whistle.
You're going to keep working on the thing, and then I'll throw questions at you as we go. So
we've gone ahead and we've cleaned up one block, and for now I'm going to go ahead and put this stamp pad and this block off to the side.
Got it. Have we used any oil-based paints? I don't believe that we have. We have not done so yet.
We want to experiment with that on wool, because so far our experience with the wool using acrylic or latex-based paints is it doesn't stick nearly as well as we want to, probably because of the natural lanolin in the wool. So we haven't done that yet, but we will at some point.
Okay.
Hey.
Interesting. I originally thought that printed bolts was how it all started.
In period?
I'm assuming.
I don't know. With the person asking that question, do you mean in period, or do you mean like what we did as a business?
My guess is in period.
In period, the answer is no. They didn't do that until probably the 1700s, when the automated printing press or like engraved copper blocks started happening. And then you saw like the calico prints in the, what did I say, you started seeing the calico prints out of India in the 1700s. And then that's when they would start selling some of the like swaths of cloth. Okay. Can you hand me that white?
Okay. No. I meant Harpy in the Hat.
Oh, no. Yeah, no. We did not, actually. We have never done a full width of cloth.
No.
Ever.
No. Some like said, she said, Aveline is again, I won't do it. And I'm like, well, I would do it if the price was right. And she goes, well, you go. And then kind of just like shook her head and walked away. Yeah. Which basically said, yeah, I'd be probably an idiot to try.
Well, listen, and there are people that do it. There is a company in the Ukraine that does it. I need the white thing down there. There's a company in the Ukraine that has talked about doing it. I don't know what their method is. And I also haven't seen the quality of it. I'm not trash talking it at all. I would be suspicious about the quality of the prints with broad swaths of cloth unless you have like a super industrial awesome setup. So, we are going to now work with the brayer. So we've got our 6-inch brayer, and in this case, I've seen people use like glass baking pans where they can just then roll it, but in this case, we're just going to use this. And we are actually going to use this gold metallic block printing ink. This is specifically made for fabric. It is really important that you get the fabric block printing ink as opposed to the water soluble block printing ink, because as soon as you wash your clothes, you're gonna have problems. So I haven't worked with this in quite some time, and so we might be making some mistakes, but we'll be making some mistakes together, and that's okay. So I'm gonna just do like a...
Okay, so Eleanor, because you are amazing. Oh, never mind. I was gonna say thought I missed questions, but here's some more. A friend did a yard of stiff silk for me because we were cutting trim for it later.
1 yard, I mean, I would consider maybe doing a yard for somebody.
She did it only how, and we didn't tape or anything underneath it and used a speedball fabricating. I think we were lucky. My table wasn't stayed. I held the other end, so as she did. Yeah, if you can hold it tight while someone is doing it, that's a big thing, because I've actually... like at a couple times have basically put my hands and spread material tightly so oviling could then work.
Yeah. Do you wanna stay home from your job and hold my fabric down?
I would do that as long as you're making as long as the business grows about 3 times more to 4 times more than what we're doing now.
Especially for teaching everybody how to do their own. I don't think our business is gonna grow that
fast. All right. That's fine. So no, I guess I'll just go to work.
Okay. So we're gonna play around with this in a second, but first we're going to give this a chance to kind of sit out for a moment. And we are going to tape down a front piece of a tunic so that you can see the process. I'm going to warn you, this might be a little bit boring for about 10 minutes. So if you're super bored, go grab a snack, go grab a drink, go to the bathroom. But if you want to see how I tape down my fabric, how I start measuring out where the block is actually going to get placed, and how I set up what's called the registration or the lines, you'll get to see that. Got it.
And okay, to answer your question, yes, we actually go off the fabric, and you'll see how we do that once we get it taped down. But it's if we're looking at a sleeve or a side, it's never just within the fabric that we have taped. We always run it all the way across. We've had pieces where only 2 inches of a 6-inch or 8-inch block was on the material and the rest was off. But again, you want that continuity. So
yep, for sure. So Lothar was kind enough to, as crisp and cleanly, iron this piece of linen as possible. This is crucial to getting very good, clean prints. On my underlayment, you can see right here is a Sharpie edge, which shows me like a perfect rectangle because I work with a lot of the same sizes. So this will help me hopefully tape down my fabric so that I'm not getting a lot of distortion to the warp and the weft, and I can keep it as straight as possible. What I also do is I'll use my flat edge to also make sure, and listen, we all know that the selvage is not necessarily the straightest part, but sometimes to get your stuff taped down, it does help to use that to start. And then down here you can see I have a long ways, and that will help hopefully pull everything so that we're nearly as perfect as possible.
Right.
We have a tape gun.
Dun, dun, dun.
We go through 6 to 8 rolls of tape a month. Easily.
Right. Tape is strangely expensive if you buy it individually. We are starting to play with different qualities of tape, but I don't have an answer for you yet on, whether spending an extra $1 on a 3M brand versus another is actually going to be better.
I feel like it is.
Tanya Aveline believes that indeed it is. So that is something to consider. You do get what you pay for.
Yes. And some of the cheaper tapes start tearing up some of my underlayment. Oh, let me share with you. Viscountess Seva that I was talking about earlier from the East Kingdom, she shared a great tip. And I was like, ooh, can I steal that tip and give it to my people in my class? And she gave you permission to share this tip. So she uses like those little yoga mats or some of those like little puzzle mats that you put together, but she uses the side of the mat that is not bumpy, textured, and she uses that to block print on, which especially for smaller projects is fantastic. But if you're doing a bigger project like this and you don't want to have like the seams of those mats necessarily, then you're going to want either a very long, broad yoga mat, or you can do layers of felt and then you put down some kind of like plasticky wrap, or you use the underlayment. Unfortunately, the underlayment is kind of expensive.
Yep. Just question on the tape. It's just box tape. You just buy it by the roll, buy it by the case, packing tape. So, yeah.
So what I did is I started taping this down, and you could see as I was talking and Lothar was talking, I kind of gently pulled this. You want just a little, like, I don't want to pull it like womp, but I do want to pull it enough so that it's nice.
Just a light tension.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I've already taped down part of it. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and gently pull this. Remember, I have my Sharpie line here. So I'm going to gently pull this along the line to keep everything hopefully set. Now, again, I do this all the time. So I am doing a cheat. If you are going to be doing this, you probably want to have your garment, you want to give yourself like 1/2 inch to 1 inch, be inside where your garment needs to be cut. I know I use a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I do this enough that I know how to get enough tension down 1/2 inch or less onto the fabric so that I don't get any waste. That is something that you're going to have to practice at, and you're not going to get right away. When we first did our outfits for Crown last year, I was working with silk taffeta, and there was definitely some waste, but I cut out around the pattern pieces and then taped as flatly as I could, and then I worried about it. But I just do this so much, I know how to kind of get away with it.
To answer the question on the Speedball fabric paint compared to the Rust-Oleum, we'll find out tonight. We've not tried the Speedball. We are curious ourselves.
We haven't tried the Speedball Metallic.
Right. Speedball Metallic. So now on a quick note on the Rust-Oleum, you can't get just one.
No, those little things you can get just the gold or the silver, but if you want a gallon, you have to get 2.
Right, because it takes 2 gallons to do the proper mixture. So, and it is a bit expensive per gallon, like $50 a gallon, but it should last you for nearly ever.
Correct. Because you got to buy like the primer that you got to mix in with the gold is like $35, and then the gold pigment is like $50. So you would get 2 gallons for about $85 to $95 bucks. So. Okay, so in this instance, I've got my Sharpie line going this way. I'm going to start by putting just a little bit of the corner down here. Okay, do you see what I'm doing? And then I'm going to gently pull this and try to only get about a 1/2 inch of the tape. Now, can you follow my finger? Oops, see, a little bit came out. Sometimes it's not perfect, so I'm going to put one little extra piece of tape out there. So I find, I want to say scroll back, can you span back? I find that especially if I'm doing a rectangular piece, you will get the best results by taping in an L first. Do your longest side first, then do a short side, so you're basically creating your 90-degree angle, and then you can go to the other side and gently pull from there and try to get things, hopefully, as tight as possible without because if I start pulling it so much, let me do this so you can see. If I start pulling it so much, see what's happening down there?
Don't do that.
Means I'm pulling
That's
too much.
Too much.
So your fabric's going to kind of talk to you and let you know, okay, you're pulling it just a little too hard.
Right.
But what I'll do is I'll take just a small piece of tape to start, and I'll loosely put that down at the end. And now I'm going to gently pull this side to try to create tautness. Is that a word? Tautness?
Tautness, yeah.
Tautiosity?
Tautai, Latin plural.
Tautability. Okay, so now I'm going to use my hand. See, in this case, you can tell actually I cut it kind of wonky. So we're going to get a little bit of waste, but that's okay. Okay.
So as she was working that, you'll see this end just how it's just sort of kind of waffling just ever so slightly and breathing as she was pulling. And it's like just that little tiny bit is perfectly okay. That means you've done it honestly just about right.
Yep. Okay.
Switching places.
Actually, I'll just spin this around.
Spin. Okay. So, and again, when we talked about staging with having multiple laments, I have walked down the stairs and then she's had these things either stacked in a like 5 high, or in some every once in a while spread out, especially as they're drying too. You can lay one out, let it dry, and then just set your next one up. So it's really good production line.
It's interesting because you think you've done such a good job of ironing and cutting, and then when you actually start pulling these things, you see right there how far out this wonky end came. And when that happens, you'll see what I do in a second. But first, let me finish taping it down.
Have we done acrylic craft paint? We've done acrylic. Yes, we have. We did that on the taffeta, on the silk.
Yeah. The silk taffeta.
Yeah, and and honestly, that was a mistake on my part because I came home with acrylic and it ended up really being beautiful.
Yeah, I liked it a lot.
Yeah, it's got a great look to it. So,
okay, this is the very last bit. I'm going to give it a little bit of a pull, and then okay. So, can you come down? You're going to do the best that you can. It is never going to be perfect. Right here, you can see just a little bit of sort of puckering or lifting, okay? When I get to that spot, I'll make sure to apply a little pressure and pull it back maybe this way, right? But in order to get everything really just staged and ready to start, we got it down like that, okay? Right. So I'm pretty pleased with overall how I've done this. However, you can see that clearly, even though I cut this on a cutting board and I used all kinds of measurements, fabric will stretch or fabric will not always cooperate. And so there's definitely some corners that are a little bit weird and wonky. On this particular tunic, let me decide which block I'm going to use. Hang on a second.
Dun, 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 dun. So...
Here, do you want to ask people what they want? Ooh.
Oh.
Ooh.
No, you do that one all the time.
I love this
I know
one.
You do that one.
Which one should we use? That's too small. We could do the Byzantine one.
No.
Too much?
Yeah.
We could do that. We do that one a lot.
I know, but it's so awesome.
It is awesome. Ooh, watch your head.
Dun, 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 dun.
We could do a pelican block.
We
already have a red and gold Regensburg.
Yeah, I think we do.
We could do a laurel.
I like laurel, a mega laurel.
Let's do... I'm so torn.
ETO?
Are there any... Huh?
ETO? No, I don't know.
We'll do that one.
Okay. Now, are we going to be actually doing this one so we can compare? Because it wasn't
we'll talk
that
about
originally.
that at the end, because I'm not sure how that one's going to work.
Well, that's the whole point.
Well, we're not going to do it on this piece that's supposed to be a tunic if it's a possible...
Alright.
Yeah, it's too much.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to do this block, guys. This is based off of a 13th century Saracen textile. Some people argue...
The awesome one. Which one is the awesome one? We have so many. The griffin. The other griffin facing the other way. The dual lions.
I really do like the lions one, but we already have a red
the 2-layer one, which is insane.
No, we're not doing that one.
I like this one too.
Yeah, but it's tiny.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Okay, guys. So, I think we're good with that. I just checked our messages. Okay. So, we need to do a little bit of math here, okay? We know that our block, and we have it written on the back of this, we know that our block from top to bottom or side to side is 7 1/4 inches. And usually I space this about 7 1/2 inches apart from each other, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is see how wide is my fabric. Mm-hmm. In this instance, it's 26 1/2 inches wide. So 26 1/2 divided by 7.5 is not an easy number. It doesn't quickly do anything. So I know I'm necessarily going to, hang on, 13.25. I know I'm necessarily going to do this centered in the middle and then working out from there. Does that make sense? If I knew that my block would perfectly fit like 4 times within this, then I would do row 1 or column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4. But because I know this is 7.25, that I'm going to space 7.5 inches apart. Scroll up to me. Okay. Because I know that this is 7.5 and that doesn't easily go into 26.5, there's going to be too much space extra. I will necessarily then center the registration and then work out from there. So I've already demonstrated or established what the middle space is. Can you grab that Sharpie right there, please? Do you guys remember how I talked about how some of my fabric was a little wonky and I told you what I would do to fix that? I'm going to take the Sharpie. I've used the flat edge to basically figure out what the flat is along this. And then over my tape, but just so I know what my reference point is, I put that there so I know what the edge of my fabric is. So when I go to measure the middle point, just as I expect, we're seeing 26.5 here. So we'll go 13.25. So right now, I've got my center line.
Yeah, the 48-inch metal ruler, it is worth investing in.
Godsend.
Hardware store.
Okay.
Have you ever found the need to go needing anything larger than 4 feet?
Yeah.
Okay.
They
do have honestly, they've got like 6-foot versions
hand me
of
2
these.
Of the yardsticks. When I have to measure more than that, I grab 2 yardsticks. And I'll either stack them, because butting them up doesn't work. But if you stack them, then you can usually expand out and then get the distance you need. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, okay. So.
Are we going to do this side by side by side, or are we going to do the offset?
No, we're going to do them side by side, I think. Side by side. Okay, so because we know the spacing in between should be 7.5, we want 2 columns, which is going to be a total of 15 inches. So if I go to the center line and I put it at 15 inches, you can see some of my ruler is hanging off, which means that only part of the block will come on. So if I go here, I mark 7.5, and then in this instance, for your guys' purposes, because it's going to be easier, I'm going to put a marker right at the 15 inch. So technically, I will have this block going up and down the middle, going up and down here, and then a small portion of it coming on from there. You'll see as we keep going. So let me do the other part here. Huh?
Stagger to look better.
You want me to stagger?
Stagger.
Okay, we're going to stagger because Walter /
Yay.
Lothar asked us to. But I still need to put my columns.
Mm-hmm.
He likes staggering. I don't like it because it's not period.
Oh, then don't do it. Oh, no. Gosh, who am I?
I'm explaining. I don't like it because it's not period.
But it's anachronistic and it looks
Correct.
awesome.
And some people like that look, so we will try it. Certainly I have done products that are anachronistic, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I'm marking at the 7.5 point, and then I'm marking at the 15 point. So we have all of our columns. And then I do, in fact, you'll see quite a few lines on my underlayment. And this will be important in a little bit. I have the hiccups, excuse me.
Sound effect, you're welcome.
I pay a lot of money for those.
Yes, 6-foot rollers at the hardware store, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, and then obviously on the fabric I'm going to do chalk, not marker. Okay, so for the purposes of tonight, we have to figure out which end is going to be our collar. We'll say right here is going to be our collar, okay? So we want our block to be oriented this way for the whole purposes of this, okay? When we start measuring the direction, it is aesthetically up to you. If you don't have a perfect amount of blocks, do you want your whole block to be here and then you end with partial block at the bottom? Or do you want a whole block at the bottom and you want a partial block at the top? I personally tend to do whole block at the bottom because that is usually more visually apparent than what is up here at the shoulder. Totally up to you to do what you want. And if you have the perfect spacing for things, great. In this instance, we'll look real quick. This is 42 inches, which divided by 7.5 doesn't make it easy. So, but we are going to stagger. So, I always use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And at the bottom of my hem, I use either a 1/2 inch seam allowance if I know I'm going to put a trim on the bottom, which in this instance I will, or I roll up, and that usually takes about 1 inch. So you need to calculate that in your head when you're now doing the up and down, side to side registration. I know this is a lot of math, and for some of you this is really boring, but for some people I know this is the part where you get the most stuck because you're not exactly sure where you start and it's hard to plan things out. So I apologize for some of you if this is the tedious part of the video, but this to me was kind of the hardest thing to sort of math out and figure out, okay, what's the best way to make this look symmetrical and not all wonky. So we are going to be putting a trim on this. So we want 1/2 inch. We know that we want our spacing to be 7.5, which divided by half is 3 3/4. So 3 3/4 plus a 1/2 inch seam allowance equals 4 1/4. I hope all my math is right. Yes, 4 1/4. So from the bottom, remember my neck, my tunic is up here. This is the top, this is the bottom. From the bottom, I'm going to come up 4 1/4.
Is that from the base or from the edge of the tape?
From the from the base of the
material.
In this case, it's both.
Okay.
But I'm doing it from the bottom of the material because I know that that's where the thing is going to actually end. So. Now, from here on up, I'm going to go every 7.5 inches. Let's do this. So we go 7.5, 15, 22.5, 30, and then 37.5, which in this case actually happens to be the exact top of our tunic. So we will remember that when we get there. And remember how my fabric is a little wonky? We'll remember that that is our middle. You can see that comes down a little bit, but that's okay. Okay, so over here, do we have any questions while I'm doing this?
Any questions? Questions?
7.5, 15, 22.5, 30, and then 37.5 is this black line. So. Now, the way that I would normally be inclined to do this garment is at each one of these crossroads, something's off. No, that's right. At each one of these crossroads, I would be placing my block. And it would be stacked at every single one. All the way up and down every single one. And even when we get here, I would be using this marker line over here to line up and down. And then this to line up here, so that the little bit of the block comes into this space. But Lothar doesn't want everything stacked. He wants it spaced out differently. So we're going to put one right here, because this is going to be right here at the heart of the garment itself. Okay? And then we'll put one right here. We'll put one right here. One right here. One right here. And then that also, yep, usually I just put a little mark there And there. Yep. Well, we'll put it here, but actually we'll be lining it up here. And this is just a little cheat that I use to keep myself steady so that I don't accidentally go the wrong way. So do you guys see what we've done? We put our little circles. So this indicates that's where I want to press down on everything. So it's going to be basically spaced out like checker boxes. Does that make sense? You look confused, Lothar.
No, it's because my brain's thinking something different.
Do you want a different spacing?
Yeah, possibly.
Okay.
So I'm going to let you grab this because what I'm thinking is we're going to go here, and then we're going to go here, and we're going to go here. So it's going to be, let me get one of the similar size blocks. Similar size. So it'll be like, this will be the primary, and then we'll...
Yeah, we can do that another time, but that takes different math.
All right. Math is important.
Yes,
and you
Bryn,
thought you'd never use it.
Bryn said, oh, neat. I couldn't figure out how you would center the block in the squares. The intersections make so much more sense. Yes, and then Jen Johnson said, does the chalk ever interfere with printing? Go ahead and flip it around and we'll answer that question.
Da-da-da.
I had it interfere one time with the finish of the printing, and it was on a silk, which caused the paint or pigment over the chalk on the silk. When we heat set it, it caused the tiniest little color differential. So technically, if you were paying attention, you could see like the line underneath.
You have to get really close.
But it was one paint with one silk, and I've never had that problem again. So I don't know if I just maybe put too much chalk. You could do lighter chalk lines. I will tell you, by and large, never, ever, ever. In fact, most people ask me, well, okay, well, how do you get the chalk lines out? Do you wash them afterwards? No. If you, especially with linen, if you hang your linen up, you shake it around a couple of times, you wear it once or twice. Yeah, see how easily that rubs off?
Oh my gosh. Poof. Yeah. It's like magic.
So honestly, it's not usually an issue. So stay right there because I don't want everybody to see.
No, cannot.
Really dirty.
Is that backwards for you guys? Because that make me really sad if it is. What are we looking for?
I'm looking for some scrap.
Oh. Here.
I got it.
Okay. Ta-da!
Okay. So you guys were asking earlier, you can see these were clearly scraps that we have used to do those first couple of prints just to kind of get started. And so I've got a scrap pile.
Thank you, Erin. Love you.
I've got a scrap pile. So that's what we're going to do, especially since we haven't worked with the metallic fabric printing ink. We are going to use this off to the side. And we're going to use it right here. So we're still on top of the underlayment. And this actually just happens to be a cotton, but it kind of doesn't matter which fabric you're using for these purposes. Okay, so now we are back. We are back to the brayer method with the fabric block printing ink. What you want to do is get a little bit, and you want to sort of gently start spreading it out pretty evenly. And you don't want to do this whole like big globule. You want to kind of just keep picking from that. It's going to take a lot of sort of moving it back and forth to get it as evenly.
Oh, good idea. Good idea.
What?
Oh, that would make cool trim if you cut them in strips, thinking like the Norse did with the woven silk patterns.
That's absolutely something we should do. And we have done for some of our stuff. And we will continue to do. So you can see on the brayer itself, it is starting to become more evenly distributed. But every time you pick up a little bit, like see how it's on the bottom part of the brayer, you gotta make sure to be moving it around. This is why I don't like the brayer method, because maybe I'm not so good at it. Although it did make me feel a little better when I heard that this is a more difficult way to do it. So we're going to give this a try.
We're good. Set it down if you need to.
Nope, it's easier to handle it this way.
Okay.
So this first block is really, really just going to basically slick on a little bit. This would probably barely transfer. So we're just going to get the block wet itself. And then I'm going to go back in for some more.
No.
And then put another rubbing on it. The nice thing about the brayer method is you're less likely to get some of the transfer in between your design elements than you are with the stamp pad or dauber method. So this is not taped down. I don't ever do that with my test prints. Oh, look at that. And actually, do you see, look right here so you can see a troubleshooting method. See how this came over a little bit and even this third layer is down here? That's why I had some blurriness there, because I wasn't evenly on all three surfaces of the underlayment. So
it's actually not bad. It needs to be a little bit thicker, but that's not bad at all.
We're gonna, I think also the bigger brayer makes a difference.
Yeah.
But boy, do you go through a lot of pigment this way, it feels like. I could be wrong. How many of you out there watching use and prefer the brayer method? I'm really, really curious. Now I'll come in deeper so that we're on all three layers. Now, remember how we talked about the rocking that I was discussing earlier? It's easier to see in a bigger block. So we'll use the directional signs. We'll rock north and south, east and west. Then these two sides, which would be basically north, northwest, and south, southeast. And then north, northeast, and south, southwest. And then do like the CPR. And then, oh my God, is that beautiful. I really like that.
So far we have one. I hate the brayer personally, and then we have the I use Aaron.
Yeah.
And then my friend used a brayer, and that's Tamara. Yeah, friend used a brayer, and that's all she used so far. It worked fine, but the stamps were small, under 2 inches.
Aaron, if you do not use the if you don't use the brayer, what do you use? Do you use the...
Are you starting at the top,
yeah,
or it really doesn't
I always start at the bottom.
That's right.
And then I center it as best as I can. Now listen, once that block touches your fabric, come up a second. Once you have put your block down, commit. Do not lift. Do not think you can reposition. And also do not think if you didn't get good coverage that you can try to get back down on top. I guarantee you cannot. So, you don't have to, but I do use the mallet. I always apply a little bit of pressure in the middle so it doesn't bounce. And I tap around the edges. And then I'll tap it in the middle. I'll set down the mallet. North and south, east and west. These two sides, some CPR, and voila. That's really pretty.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest though, I feel like we're going through like a lot of pigment with the brayer. I just don't know.
If I go back through and watch the previous videos, well, I hear a description of how to come up with actual period designs.
We do discuss it a little bit in terms of where we get our inspiration. We also discuss how to transfer your design idea and things you need to think about when putting it on a block. And sometimes everything you see either woven or drawn isn't necessarily best carved, so we do address that. However, we're going to be putting out more classes on that stuff in the future, so we recommend that you subscribe to our YouTube page.
You want a picture of this coat when it's done? I will be wearing it, so yes, yes. The brayer works better if you don't go back and forth as much, because if you do, the same parts of the brayer are going to go over the same parts of the pigment or stamp. So if there's a gap, it ends up It ends up at the same place each time.
That's great information. Who shared that?
That is from Jen Johnson.
Oh, thank you, Jen. Okay. Now, when I'm doing this, I'm trying to line up as best as I can. This line with this chalk line, obviously, and this line here.
Hey,
I will tell you, from your perspective, it is going to look different than from my perspective. So it may look like I'm off, but as long as you are doing your block from the same side, everything will be consistent. Does that make sense? So even if I'm not directly true north, so to speak, if I'm a couple of millimeters off, if I continue to do my block all from this side, it will be the same number of millimeters off. If I switch to the other side for some of this, that is where you will get some of the wonkiness. Is Jolly Buka on? Rav?
Yes.
Okay.
Bum, bum, bum. I don't know. Okay, well, there was a question on this paint versus the Rust-Oleum. I want to say the Rust-Oleum covers a little bit deeper and maybe it's a little bit brighter, but then again, we're using the brayer on this where we didn't on the other, so that might make a difference.
I feel, well, I think you're right, but there's a couple reasons why. This is an ink. An ink and a paint have two different thicknesses and viscosities. So yes, I think the paint does give better coverage than the ink, but the ink is closer to what was period. So in this case, remember, my Sharpie line right here at the very top of my tunic is actually going to be my midpoint. So I'm going to line it up as best as I can. And you will see when I lift this that some of the block is actually going to be off onto the underlayment itself. Sometimes I will put a paper towel under there so that it won't get all over my underlayment. Or sometimes, as soon as I lift, you can see that there, I will take a piece of paper towel and I will gently wipe up some of it so that hopefully I don't accidentally set my my hand or my arm or my elbow into it. And so you'll see I'll do the paper towel method, the next one at the top. Just be careful though that you don't go over your tape onto your garment and smear up your paint there. Does that make sense? Okay.
So do we know in advance the difference on our washing methods for the ink versus the paint?
I have to research.
Okay.
I'll read the back of this in a second.
Right. So, yep. So for those of you who weren't here on some of the earlier videos about wear and such, we recommend. So every time that we're done with our latex paint, we always go with an iron after everything's dry to basically set it into the material. Which basically it's a heat setting. And I normally do the front and the back of the material, and you'll feel the texture difference where it becomes smooth after you iron it. At that point, it should be good to go for a regular gentle wash. But what I would recommend, and just to be on the safe side for maximum, would be a cold hand wash and dry. So now that you've done this a little bit, what do you think so far?
I mean, I think I would be more inclined to use the brayer more than I was previously inclined after my first experience, so I'm glad I pushed myself to try it. I think I personally still like the stamp pad method better, but that might also just be because it's like a first love. It's what I really got adept at doing. I want you to watch something, because we've done a couple of blocks. So when I go to pull up this block, I want you to see what's happening here, because this will help you troubleshoot some ideas when you start making some errors. Okay, north-south, east-west. This side, this side, this side, this side, some CPR. Now watch. When I start lifting this block, you're going to see this fabric lifting. That is going to start over the course of several blocks, especially if you're doing repeated things. It's going to see the puckering that's happening here and here. You've got to watch for that as you continue to progress, so that when you go to come down, you're not putting your block down over a pucker, and that will create either some wrinkles or lines underneath, or you just won't get a good clean image. So here you can see the care for this says this is an oil-based ink. It cleans up easily with soap and water. It is for use on cotton, polyester, blends, linen, rayon, and other synthetic fibers, not for use on nylon. Also works great on paper and cardboard. Printed fabrics can be laundered after curing for 1 week at room temperature. Cool water and mild soap is preferred when laundering. So that's interesting.
Ta-da.
It'll take us a lot longer for it to...
Got it. Is the ink still like paint might be? How does that affect a clothing design usage? The drape altered by stiffness.
Yes. Your drape is going to be more stiff if you are using a paint, especially if you are like us and you generally use paints without a medium, and especially if your particular block is very surface heavy, meaning there's not a lot that's carved away and you're utilizing most of the surface of your block. You will find a lot more stiffness, relatively speaking, but I have never found in all the time that we're doing this that the stiffness from using even house paints without a medium has ever so substantially affected the look of the garment that I didn't like it. Does that make sense? There's definitely a difference.
And again,
I don't think it's a functional
difference. And again, the heat setting with the iron makes a massive difference. I mean, there's still the paint there, but the stiffness, I would say probably at least 50 to 75% of the stiffness disappears after you do the heat setting with the iron.
Now, test your iron. We have tested 3 different irons. We have never had a problem. But if you got a crazy Mamba Jamba iron that gets super, super hot, you're going to want to do a test strip before you actually iron your full garment that you just block printed the heck out of.
Yeah, the only issue that we ever ended up having, and when it was on the double block where it was the silver with the black over the top of it. And we weren't sure. We haven't had that experience since then, but we're still not sure if that was based on the 2 layers of paint or if it was the metallic. But we're not really sure at this point. But if we find out in the future, we'll let you all know.
And that client did wash it in the laundry tub and said they had no problems.
Okay.
Okay, I want to show you a mistake I just made. Do you see how my brayer just kind of rolled off onto the corner here? It is important that you are wiping that away either with a paper towel or honestly, I usually use my hands. So that when you're rocking your block, you don't accidentally transfer that onto the actual fabric itself. And hopefully I've wiped away enough. I feel like, is that one much lighter than the others? It's hard to tell from this angle.
It does from this.
Yeah. So, that's okay. Remember how we talked about if one is slightly off, or even if several are slightly off, the overall look and feel of your garment is still going to be awesome.
I like to put down a metal right angle ruler when I lift up the block, especially on the big ones. That's a good idea.
I've actually kind of done that. Yeah, Grav, that makes sense. I've used that on especially some of the edge pieces. Just use a regular straight blade, but I love the idea of an angle. What do they call those? Square.
Angle square, yeah.
Okay.
I'll get you one.
Thank you, honey.
Okay.
Okay. So we're getting actually pretty close to being done with this one.
Got the weird corners.
Yep, we're going to do that. So remember how we talked about, sometimes what I'll do is I'll put a paper towel right here. That doesn't actually end up impacting anything in terms of the block itself, but it prevents the pigment from getting all over the underlayment. So I go like this.
Yep. And you will want to basically come up with, these are going to be the clothes I will always wear when I do this. Because you will slowly get paint on them here and there. So.
Yeah. I hate getting paint all over my clothes.
So you're going to share this?
No, I don't want to tell her. Are you going to tell her?
No, it's up to you. All right, never mind. So she has a secret way of not getting paint on her clothes when she block prints. I'll let you guys figure it out.
If you don't wear clothes, you don't get paint on it. I can't believe you just outed me. You kind of did.
No, you started it.
Okay, and then you can see the paper towel picked up that. It prevented it. You do have to make sure that you're not getting a lot of fuzzies on your block from that. I've never had that problem, but I don't know what kind of paper towels you might have at home. So, we're going to finish up our edges. And then we'll actually be all done with this front piece. And then later on, honey, I'll finish up
good.
the rest of it. Okay, I need to move this forward a little bit. Okay. Making sure that my underlayment is even. I've got my paper towel there. Remember, this line right here is the center of my block, not this line right here, which was just to show me where the edge of my fabric should be.
No, we haven't had any issues with the metallic changing colors when we've done the ironing.
No, somebody else?
No, that was just Brett. Have we ever had any issues with it?
No, the only problem we ever had was the metallic paint, and that was the Rust-Oleum paint. Seemed to kind of not melt, but the lines became more blurry.
Yep. And again, that was also on the...
In this case, I'm not going to use the mallet because I'm really just trying to get this much fabric.
Yeah. But that was also the double painted one, so that was just that.
Yeah, that was a complicated case, and I don't think we were doing something super tricksy, and I don't think it's going to apply to most of the stuff you guys are doing. How's everybody doing? Are we teaching you everything you want to know? Are there subjects we haven't really touched yet that you're like, when are they ever going to get to it? Okay. How many people do we still have on right now?
64 million.
Wow!
64K. Yeah, that's it. So, Aggie, thank you for being here. Have a great night.
Bye, Aggie. We do have a little bit more to talk about if you guys want to stick around. And then we'll do some questions and answers, and we'll actually go over the handout itself to talk about just a couple more troubleshooting tips. So I like this. I think that particular print is lighter than the others. Yeah. It's pretty. I think I actually personally prefer the Rust-Oleum more than I prefer this metallic ink. But I think part of that is, if I'm going to be doing all of this work, I want you to see it.
Yeah.
I want you from across the room to see that beautiful bright color. This is a gorgeous subtle thing. And when we did the metallic paint, even that was less obvious, so to speak, from across the room than some of our average, like, red, yellow, white kind of pigments.
Sure.
Hang on, which side do I need? I need this side.
Okay.
But, is there a question?
No, yeah, it's just, I'm considering freehand painting something rather than carving on a particular design on a block after tracing with chalk first. Bad idea.
No, not at all. If you look at our handout, which we'll go over in a second, you will see there is a distinct difference, though, between what something looks like after it has been block printed versus what something looks like after it has been hand painted. There is a gentleman, I do not know his SCA name, but his Facebook name on the printed textiles groups is Jorge Stenor, and he does hand painted stuff, and oh my god, is it gorgeous. It is far more talented than I could ever do. It just achieves a different effect. You actually get much more pigment coverage when you hand paint. Oh, I almost dropped that block.
That's never happened before.
That has definitely happened and made me cry. But you're definitely going to get a brighter image through hand painting than blocking. And we'll go over that when you see the actual handout. Last block, guys. You stuck around. Good job. We kind of timed it right. That's good with the amount of pigment that we put out here.
Were you able to try the printed stamp block? If so, did it work?
Is that Bryn? CJ?
Yeah.
We haven't tried it yet, and we'll talk to you about that, why we don't think it's going to work, but it's not anything you necessarily did wrong. We'll tell you why. We did get it today, though. Ooh! Little blurry. Okay. So, talk to them for a second. Let me clean up this block real quick.
Dun, 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 dun. I've gone back over faded, lightly printed areas with a paintbrush after painting. Yes.
That is problematic, though.
Okay.
And we'll talk about that in a second. It becomes much more, kind of like I just said, it's a brighter thing. Mm-hmm. So.
Okay, there is a question here.
Yeah.
Is there... how many stamps is too many on a garment? Is it just aesthetics that determine which percentage of the garment is block printed?
Okay, well, hang on.
And yes, the Rust-Oleum I believe we got at Lowe's.
Yeah.
The metallic, yeah, that was at Lowe's. But again, if you're going gallons, you're looking at 2 gallons at about roughly $85, $90. Yeah. But again, it should last you forever.
Okay. Let me grab a chair.
Got it. Should you block from the furthest away to closest so you don't smear the pigment?
Yes. Usually, yes.
And yep. And how long is it? Do you wait before the pigment is safe to touch?
It depends on the medium. With the house paint, usually 20 minutes and you're good. But I will usually leave it for a couple of hours. You want to swing back this way so we'll both be together?
Yes.
Ugh, I'm getting a hair headache. Let's do this.
Grav, I keep a pin. There you go. Let you go.
I keep a pin with a big round head on it and use it like a small paintbrush to correct boo-boos. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, guys. All right. Hi. Okay. So let's answer a couple of the questions. To the person that asked about multiple blocks. First of all, as we always tell you, it's your aesthetic. Whatever you want. If you want to know what the period answer was, almost exclusively it was one block or motif that was repeated over and over and over again. I cannot think of any block printed or I'm just going to say block printed because resist dyeing and stenciling is different. So I cannot think of any block printed garment. Come on, this way. I cannot think of any block printed garment that used multiple blocks to create different motifs. There are motifs that needed multiple blocks to create that one thing, like the head on something was gold, the eyes were red, the beak was blue, but that was to create one design image. I can't think of any extant pieces where there were multiple blocks used on one piece. But again, do what you want. Do what's going to make you feel good.
We're in the process of doing a design that is 1, 2, 3, 4 different blocks, and it's all going to come together to be something spectacular. So
I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that's going to be, yeah.
You're really excited about that. Okay. So Siobhan asked you block. Yes, the reason I did it differently was just because I wanted you guys to see sort of mentally, okay, so the thing needs to be in the middle to figure out how to make it so that your tunic piece will then be symmetrically cut from the middle of that block printed fabric. Does that make sense? So I blocked it differently than I would normally block, just so visually for the class you guys could see, oh, okay, well that makes sense why she started her chalk line in the middle. Grav had a great suggestion, and I'm going to show you. I also keep paintbrushes around because this is an important thing. So if you really screw the pooch, if you really mess up a block and you're like, oh, that's going to ruin the whole thing, I need to fix it, you can use paintbrushes to try to fix things. However, if you look on, I think it's the, yeah, it's the third to last page on your handout. It looks like this, okay? You can see on the top, one of these I hand painted over, one of them I did not. Can you tell which one's which? You're right. That one was hand painted. So unless you're hand painting all of your blocks, suddenly this block is going to look a lot darker or brighter, in fact. There's going to be more coverage because you've hand painted it versus this one. If this one was just a total fail and you were going to have to basically scrap your garment, then I would hand paint it, right? But be careful not to do it too much. So here I was teaching a student and they let me take pictures for educational purposes. This was on wool, and so it wasn't getting nearly the pigment coverage that they hoped. And so out of curiosity, they, who are a very skilled calligrapher and illuminator, took a paintbrush and started painting over where the block was. They didn't use a lot of pigment, but you sure can see the difference, right, between hand-painted and blocked. And they even put this next to it.
Now, one of the things to alleviate that a little bit is you could actually, once you do the hand painting with the brush, you could put a paper towel and just, without make sure you're not moving it at all, but down and basically blot that and pull some of that up, and that'll even it out ever so slightly.
Yep.
So that will, that'll help some.
For sure. The other tip or trick is, say you lift it up and you, for whatever reason, you just missed a big old globule of pigment in the middle of it. If you immediately take your brush, do not apply any more pigment to the brush, but you simply start trying to move around the pigment that was already down on the fabric, and you try to move it into that space. So you're basically trying to move around the pigment as opposed to adding more pigment. I have found I've been able to kind of clean up some things without very obvious touch-ups. But even then, even with a brush, you're able to push the pigment deeper in between the warp and weft threads than you will with a block. So I can still tell the difference. Most people can't. And again, it's not the end of the... Look at this funny, crazy... Look at this. What is going on? It's like my mom used to call these my devil's horns. Okay, sorry. Got very distracted for a moment. So I can tell the difference between something that is hand-painted and something that is blocked. Because a block, because necessarily you're looking at one plane on top of another plane, and there's no part of your block that should, in theory, be pushing in deeper to your warp and weft, versus these little bristles sure are going to push down in. You can tell the difference. It's such a minute difference that in most cases you can't tell. However, look at this one. I don't know if I still have... Okay. This is the very first block printing I ever did. This is for Their Royal Majesties Akos and Bella. And you can see here, part of this is painted and part of it is not. Part of this is painted and part of this is not. You can tell quite obviously, and it's harder to tell from this printout. It's easier when you're looking at it on the screen. Right here, I painted in all these tail feathers, and I painted in the bottom part of the body, and I painted this leg, but I didn't paint this little baby bird, right? So if you were going to hand paint your image, especially if you're doing a lot, at that point it almost would have been better for me to just commit fully and paint the whole friggin' thing versus looking at that and going, wait, why are parts of that like super bright and other parts are not, right? So it's just something to think about. So if with this, on this part of the handout, it shows you trick. You can touch up your print with a paintbrush, but be prepared that this is very difficult to do. It does take some finessing without a very obvious difference in pigment coverage between the printed and the painted, as can be seen with these 3 examples above. Only paint mistakes. If you're like your intention is to paint the garment, that's fine, but only paint and fix up your mistakes when absolutely necessary, using as little amount of pigment as possible, and making sure to try to, as evenly as possible, apply it across your motif. So, let's see what other questions we have, and then we'll start going over the handout. There you go. So Geetha says, I tried to go over with paintbrush when I was in your in-person class, and it gives a distinctly different looking texture. Yep, we just showed that picture. Siobhan says, makes sense. I'm just a klutz. Look, I've done it too many times. I've been like, oh, that one it's going to bother me if I don't fix it. I need to just touch it up. It's not the end of the world, but be aware that it is going to change things. Says they have that spray can sticky tack kind of stuff. Would that work for holding down a piece of cloth? No. Nope, I think that would be a nightmare. It also might bleed up through part of your fabric. It also, I don't know how it would even come off. I would not. If you try it, let me know, Bryn. I would not try it. Casey, what do you do when you have one piece of a block that is a different color, for example, the eye or tongue of an animal? Can you grab the Oseberg blocks? So the blocks that Lothar just talked about, the 4-block piece, as well as this block that we're going to show you, shows you how we do it. So this is the base of the block, right? This, you would say, do all in white. And then we would use this, which is a jig. Thank you, Grav Weldon, Baron Jolly Bukov of Kathmandu Designs. He laser engraved this design after I patterned it out in Photoshop, and he made the jig for us. And you can even see on the jig I have my orientation lines to keep things centered, right? So I do this, I stamp that block, I keep the jig where it's at, I grab the second block.
After we let it dry.
Which we use a blow dryer for, because Lothar was smart and taught me that. And then, leaving the jig where it was, I then stamp this block, which would then go over the other one. Can you grab the examples that are over there so you can see what you want? So that is a pattern, or a period method. We have multiple blocks in period that showed that were definitely at least 2, and we have evidence of one that is at least a 3 block, and I feel like I have seen one that's also a 4 block.
This is the silver metallic, the Rust-Oleum.
So you can see the silver was the first block, and this was just a test, which is why it looks kind of junky. We were learning how to work with it, and that's how we do a first or second.
Right. And then as you practice and get a little bit better with the same thing,
look, Mom, look what I can do. Yeah. Shaban says, would a sponge... Oops. Back. Would a sponge brush, one of those little sponges on a stick, help with obvious brush strokes? Maybe. You would have to get really teeny tiny. And I'm glad that you brought up those, like, sponge brushes.
The nice thing with the sponge... Oh, it's fine. One of the nice things with the sponge brushes is you can actually cut them with scissors and get as finite as you possibly can.
I would imagine you would need to work with like tweezers though to get it tiny enough to get on in there. So come on in so they don't see our dirty basement. Pretend like you guys aren't seeing that. But while we're speaking about those little sponge brushes, I want to talk about again Viscountess Seva. In her class, which again I'll find the link for and I'll link below, she uses like those little sponge daubers that you can get like at Joann's and maybe some of the other hobby stores. And then she uses her little sponge dauber or whatever size she wants to apply to the surface of her block. Mm-hmm. It was very interesting. I hadn't seen that done before and I was like, oh man, that I could definitely see working for certain projects. I think for me it would probably be less work to use the stamp pad method and the brayer, but I'm really curious to try hers. So it was very interesting. And that actually is period, by the way. In period, what they would do is they would take some kind of glove or just a bare hand. They would apply the pigment. What is this part of your hand called?
The palm.
The butt? No, this is your palm. This part right here.
Yeah, that part.
This part, whatever that technical term is.
The heel of your hand. Thank you.
Which is actually why in Russian, block printing is really called heel pad stamping, because it's the heel of your hand. So, and the word is naboyka. So you put the pigment here, and then you would apply it. Mm. So using the little foam dauber is just a much more modern and cleaner way to do that. I know nothing about hand painting fabric either, but would it make sense to do a block printing first intentionally as a guide? Yep, so you could. It might save you some time. It certainly would work with some symmetry. I just would wonder, if you've already block printed, why paint it? Unless you want to embellish it, and that was also done in period. Right. So you could block print this gold, and then I'm going to put in some black embellishments or some blue embellishments or whatever. That is period.
Right. And again, also addressing earlier, like doing a bird and putting, like, a color, a little slight drop of color for the eye or the beak or whatever. Yeah, that's just time-consuming, but totally period.
Okay.
I think, yes.
So it's 9 o'clock. We're going to briefly go over...
Listen to her. I have no idea what I'm saying.
Okay, we're going to briefly go over this. I'm not going to go over too much of it because you guys have this as a handy-dandy guide. Hopefully it's self-explanatory. If you have any questions, please go ahead and shoot us those questions. While I start to go over this very quickly, for those of you that have been here this whole time, have played along and tuned in, go ahead and put down your email address. Also, the Mound of Venus palmistry. That's interesting. Go ahead and put down your email address if you want to be entered to win the block printed white trim with the red block from Kathmandu Designs that we did earlier. We're not specializing. We're not doing a bunch of... You get what you get, and you don't throw a fit, as my kids used to say. So if you want to win that, go ahead and throw your email address up. afterwards, when we pick our winner, I'll go through, I will remove your email addresses so nobody farms them or fishes them off of Facebook and then send you random spam.
You want them just to private message you? With
no, I don't want that many private messages. I love you guys. Don't want that many private messages. Right. So here's your handout. We had our glossary list, which we went over already. Woo, we got our first entry. And then we kind of go through and show some of these tips and tricks. So on this first one, you can see that we didn't actually iron our fabric very well. And so when I went to put the block down, it kind of like crimped underneath. And that's why you see that groove or channel. So if you're seeing something like that, that means your fabric is probably puckering or hasn't been properly ironed. So that's your best tip. Additionally, if you see like a blurred print, like you can see here on these Regensburg lions, it almost looks like the heads are doubled. That was because as I had my block here and I'm hitting it with a mallet and I was holding it here, but this part of my block actually bounced a little bit and the fabric underneath it moved a little bit, which is why I got the blurriness. So if you're seeing some blurriness or some double printing, it means you probably haven't held your fabric tightly enough. It has either not been secured or you bounced it or whatever. Thank you, Jen Johnson. That's totally fine to enter for somebody else who says that they're watching. That's fine. Also, same thing, inadvertent transfer of the pigment. Remember how we talked about if your fabric is kind of puckered a little bit, you might get some transfer. You can see right here on this little hook, there was some inadvertent transfer. Same thing here, some inadvertent transfer. And you can see if you look, it's easier to see on the computer than it is on the printout, but you can definitely see the fabric is like started to raise up. We kind of talked about this a little bit. On these areas right here, you can actually see where part of the block itself, the edge of the block, picked up some of that paint. And when I was rocking, I didn't notice it and it transferred. So you can actually see we have gone back in and carved this down. Even though this was laser engraved and cut, we went ahead and kind of beveled this down so that hopefully we will get far less of that, because I do lots and lots of rocking to get as full of a transfer as possible. For those of you that are watching and are not friends with me and cannot comment for any reason, go ahead and shoot me a PM. I will check all my other messages so that you can be entered to win, so that you don't feel left out. Okay, so next one, you can see here and down here and here. It just means I didn't have enough pigment on my block for the most part. This one right here, we talked about some of the welling, and you guys saw this when I accidentally left my Mughal block in the pigment pan. It just means the paint itself was welling up outside the element and that I needed to be more careful. I cleaned that up now with a paintbrush or a Q-tip. Here you see some bleeding in between elements. That means my grooves or my channels are either not thick enough or I'm applying too much pigment either with a dauber or a stamp pad. You usually don't see this when you use the brayer method, which is why when I talked to Baron Jolly Buka, I was like, I'm getting this problem. He's like, I never have that problem. I use a brayer. And I'm like, that's why you're magnificent, Baron Jolly Buka. But I use the dauber and the stamp pad method for the most part. And I also try to make sure these are carved wide enough so we don't have those problems. We talked about this page already. This was a little trick if you ever need to butt up. Somebody asked me this question in the Facebook event group, so I want to address that for this. Why would you ever need to do this, right? Well, remember when we talked about, I plan out how do I want my blocks to land, right? I want the full block to land at the very bottom of the garment, because most of the time you don't see what's at the shoulder. Versus if I have a whole thing here, but a half block or a partial block at the bottom, it's much more obvious, and you think, why would you cut it like ventally? Why would you cut your fabric there? Why would you stamp it there? To avoid that, I do full block from the bottom and I move my way up. Your aesthetic, you guys do whatever you want to. Elizabeth, I see your question. I'll answer it in a second. But for the purposes of this, I did a full garment in which the fabric went all the way up over the shoulder and continued on the back, and there was actually no shoulder seam. And then the way that it was timed was that half the block was here, and then half the block would have technically been on the other side of the seam. But since there was no seam, I didn't want part of my block to be upside down this way, or part of my block to be upside down front ways. So I did this little trick. I basically stamped on top of the, sorry I'm covering your beautiful face, I stamped on top of the tape, and then I removed the tape so that you get this final product. That one was a little less pigmented than the other one, but you can kind of see that was how I did the shoulder without an actual seam. And then finally, this is our double block process. This is just a tip. If you're doing staggered or every other kind of things, I find that it is better to do all the parallel rows or columns first, and then go back through and do the staggered or offset, because it's much easier to perfectly center in between each one of these. So Elizabeth says, if you have that bleeding, can you fix it? Or is it better to not touch it and just accept the mistake? Don't try to fix it. Once your pigment is on the fabric, do not try to wipe it away. Your absolute best bet is don't touch it, let it dry, and then try to scrape it away, usually with a fingernail if you're using paint. If you're using ink or dye, it is what it is. Probably nobody's going to notice it.
It's water soluble until it sets.
No, it's not.
Is it?
No.
I thought it said. Okay. All right.
No.
Never mind.
No, it cures. So, like, you don't want to throw the fabric block printing ink, the speedball stuff, that gold stuff we just used. You don't want to throw that in the wash. You probably don't even want to wear it. But it's not water soluble.
Right. I thought it was until it sets. Anyway.
No. Nope.
Okay.
So, any other questions, want you to go ahead and list them here. And then I have some sort of outgoing thank yous and some information for you. First of all, are you reading it?
Well, it's this,
he doesn't believe me.
No. It's not that at all.
All right, hang on.
It was just the unique oil-based ink cleans up easily with soap and water, but
that doesn't make it water soluble,
no,
though. That's different.
No, I didn't know if you could listen to it. But anyway,
I'd be curious. You know what? We might test some of that on like a piece of fabric and then try to hand wash the fabric before it cures.
Yeah.
I don't know. So, okay. So come on over here for some final thoughts. Final Thoughts by Lothar Noveline. If you have any questions, now's the time to get them in. So here's some information for you guys. This is the last of 3 classes that were originally designed and intended to get you started in block printing. I got the hiccups, excuse me. That does not mean that's the last of our classes on the subject. In fact, we have already started trying to brainstorm some ideas of classes related to block printing that we can continue to put up on YouTube, and then we'll try to get them out there via Facebook. If you're not already a member, you should be a member of the Printed Textiles in the Middle Ages group. That group, I think, was started by Bridget Bishop. I apologize if I have that wrong, but she's at least the administrator right now. She's a fantastic and very talented woman, knows a lot, and does beautiful work. There are some people in there that are far more talented than I think I will ever be in terms of execution. And there are people that are my heroes in there. It's great to see some of the experimentation in there. We highly recommend that you go and be a part of that group.
Yeah, every now and then you'll see something that you just stop because it is just so magnificent.
And it's exciting. It's really exciting to see people get on there and be like, hey guys, look what I tried today. And you're like, that inspires me to try something like that. So hopefully these 3 classes inspired you to try. And we know that it can be a very overwhelming hobby. There is a lot to absorb. There's a lot to buy. Honestly, it's a heck of an investment. And it's scary to be like, oh, what if I mess this up? Because it's a little different than like many other crafts. Not all, but others.
But on the flip side, okay, so you're cutting out your garment. You mess up a sleeve. Okay, you've lost half a yard maybe. So
I don't recommend that the first thing you do to work on is the first thing we did, which was silk taffeta.
Right. Yeah.
But the fun secret about that is that silk taffeta, I found 14 yards of silk taffeta at a secondhand store, and I did do a bleach test and a fire test and confirmed that it was probably at least 80% actually silk for $9.99. So I felt a little less badly. I felt a little less badly about our first outfits, which we made for Crown, which are those blue and black shot silk taffeta with the gold design that we used actually on this one over here. So that was a little less intimidating because it was like, well, it's a beautiful fabric, but I only spent $10. Yeah. What is the most user-friendly fabric? I would say cotton. If you don't care about period accuracy, Elizabeth, your most user-friendly is cotton, because most cottons are more tightly woven than just about any other fabric, except for sometimes silk. Silk sometimes have fantastically tight weaves, but it's not user-friendly because when you screw up silk, you cry. When you screw up cotton, you're like, oh, well, I'll go spend $4 a yard to get some more. So that's the one you'll get the best prints, and I think are the best to get started on. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, we did mention, I think, last class before, the weight of the linen will affect your print as well. You know, medium definitely is good. Heavy, even more so.
I
the
would
light,
try loose or light.
It's gonna be just too open of a weave.
And not only that, but it'll bleed through to everything. And I mean, it might not be bad, especially if you're just gonna do like a little light accenting as opposed to trying to do the whole thing. But I would be reticent to try blocking an entire light weight weave linen. So we have a YouTube channel. We talked about that earlier. We would love eventually to get to 1,000 subscribers. We're only around like 150 to 175, somewhere in that range. So we have a while to go, but we will continue to put out more block printing classes, as well as other classes related to arts and sciences. Whether you do a reenactment, whether you're part of the SCA, whether you're part of another group, I in fact have a lot of people that are here that do dagger hair, which is just I shouldn't say just. It is a buffer sport, right? And a little bit of a role-playing game. I have LARPers that come to these classes as well. And I have people that don't do any of that. They just want to do some cool stuff, and they've seen it on Pinterest, and they want to try. So you will see a lot of arts and sciences classes. You'll also see a daily blog, not daily, a semi-regular blog or vlog that we do. You may or may not know that I was very fortunate enough to receive a grant from the Society of Antiquarians of London. And hopefully, depending on what's going on in the world, my hope is that by October or November, the world will have opened back up, and I will be able to go and execute that grant. And that grant is actually me going to do research at least 4 or 5 museums and repositories and treasuries, where I will actually be inspecting, investigating, taking pictures of, and actually using a microscope, not a fabric microscope, but a high-powered microscope and camera to look very, very closely at some of these garments to see what some of the similarities and differences are between different things, and to also try to identify maybe where some of those things came from. We're hopefully going to learn a whole lot about block printing, much more than we know right now, because there's so little information that is available about block printing before really the Renaissance. So all of the information that I learned that I'm allowed to share, because certain things have to kind of get released under different circumstances, all those things will get shared as I can on the channel itself. And we're really hoping to make it sort of an all-in-one, hey guys, we're trying this. This is a how-to. This is how I screwed up. How not to do it. This is what I'm doing. This is right now one of the vlogs that we have on there is about a project that I'm working on. It's a long-term project, but you can follow along. And then hopefully we can start getting some videos up of you too, because I know you've got some things you want to try. So the YouTube channel is youtube.com/C for the letter, or for the word channel /Harpy and Hag. So please go subscribe there, and you'll also get notifications. If you are a Midrealm member and you want to get credit in RUM, this has been put into the system as block printing : stamping your fabric online. So go ahead and just add that from the list of available classes. Also, if you have already taken those other 2 classes, or you want to go to our YouTube channel, you can still take those other 2 classes. The first class is block printing, a brief history and a primer on how to get started. That is also available on YouTube, and you can still get RUM credit. And the second class is block printing, carving your block. All 3 of those classes are in the drop-down menu so that you can add them quickly and easily and not have to really enter anything else. You can take those classes at your leisure. Eleanor, if you're still on, oh, thank you. Casey put up the link to our YouTube page. So please go and subscribe. It helps us a lot. It gives us some extra functionality so we can get this stuff out to you. And hopefully one day we can actually just live stream directly to YouTube and we don't have to worry about which medium it's on. If you guys have ideas for classes that you want us to do, whether they're related to block printing, sewing, or anything else, please let us know. If there's a particular thing like, we want to see a 10-minute video on how you actually clean up all your blocks, we can put that out there. If there's anything else that you want to see, please let us know. Eleanor says you are both a joy. Thank you for teaching. Your classes have been amazing. Thank you very much.
Okay.
If you have stumbled through these, you've spent 5 hours or more with us, and we appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Show us what you've been doing. Got any parting words?
No,
You're ready for bed.
I'm getting, Yeah, my patient caseload was very intense today, so I'm kind of wiped. But you guys have been great. I'm glad that we can share this with you. Keep coming back. We'll keep doing it.
Show us what you're doing. Send us pictures. Let us know. We had somebody send a picture of the block that they carved as an On to Your Populous badge, and we'll share that with you guys. If you want to stay... One last thing.
Always.
I'm a little long-winded. So if you want to stay in touch with us, and if you want to get updates on everything, the best way to do it is to go to harpyandhag.com, and we have an email list. So you can go ahead and enter your email in. We're not going to flood you with emails. We're not going to flood you with solicitations, though if we have sales, you'll probably get a notification of that. But every time the blog lists something, you'll get a notification. So that's really the best way to keep in touch with us. You're also welcome to send me a friend request. I accept everybody. Lothar's a little more discerning.
No. Yes.
He's with me. He's not that discerning. Did you unfollow me?
Huh? No.
That's why he never sees any of my posts. You unfollowed me.
No.
Okay, so it looks like we had lots of thank yous. Thank you guys. We love you. We appreciate you for sticking around.
Yep.
And dealing with our zaniness. Yeah. Show us what you do. We want to see more block printing out there.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye.